started. Yes, here we go. All right, let's get started. My name is Andrew Fraknoi. I'm a retired astronomy professor and textbook author and person in astronomy education for many centuries, it seems like. It's my pleasure to be the moderator for this particular breakout session on libraries, the Eclipse, and library partnerships, working with libraries, helping libraries, using libraries, etc. We welcome all of you to this session. We'll have some presentations at the beginning to give you the background information on what we did in 2017 and what some of the plans are for the next two eclipses. But then we want to encourage a discussion with you. We welcome questions or plans or suggestions. And so when we've done the formal presentation part, then we'll open things up and we'll encourage you to use the reaction button on your Zoom. If you go to that reaction button, the bottom part of it allows you to raise your hand. You then jump magically to the front of my queue and I can see you and recognize you. So that will be a good way to participate. All right, but let's begin by hearing a little bit about what happened with libraries in 2017. And I'm going to recognize Anne Holland from the Space Science Institute, who was a key member of the team who made that happen. Anne, please take it away.
Excellent. Thank you, Andy. So yeah, my name's Anne Holland. I'm from the Space Science Institute in Boulder, Colorado. So yeah, we led a effort both through a NASA-funded project and through a Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation-funded project in 2017 about eclipses in libraries. Talked a little bit about it in the last session, so I won't go through everything here. Mostly, I just want you to see all of the amazing pictures that came out of public libraries, intergenerational learners, learners that actually look like the community they're in, which is very difficult sometimes to get at the more formal venues or the venues with paid admission. So everyone's very familiar with this map. This is the Path of Totality in 2017. But I really like to show this map because to some of the points we were making in the last session, we're all super excited about totality, but the libraries could have cared less. It didn't matter where they were. They were very excited to do this. This map pretty much corresponds to a population map of the country, right? If there were libraries in an area, they participated in the eclipse. Up in Alaska, they barely got any eclipse and it was rainy and it didn't matter. They were still out there with their glasses trying and they were still having programs before and after the eclipse. So that's one thing that I'm sure Andy and Dennis are going to talk about, but that I also wanted to highlight about our library programs. Very few of them happened on the day of the eclipse. Many of them were informational before or kind of inspirational after, where people were like sharing their images and making artwork and doing cool things. So if you plan on being in totality during the day of the eclipse, does not mean that you can't be working with libraries more closer to you prior to that. So this we already talked about, 2.1 million glasses, 7,000 individual locations. Somebody asked right before we got kicked off the last one, there are 17,000 public libraries in the United States. About 15,500 of them would be able to participate in a program like this. Some of those public libraries are the secretary at the sheriff's office has a pile of books behind her, but they're ALA members, so it counts. So we don't count those, but the other 15,500. The libraries allowed more than 6 million people to safely view the eclipse, 35,000 eclipse-based programs, again, most not on Eclipse Day, obviously, reaching 1.75 million people, kids, families, older folks, everybody who is interested. Threw this in the chat the last time. I wanted to point out that some of our major partners last time were the Solar System Ambassadors and Night Sky Network. Our team was really small. We could do programs, virtually for librarians to learn more about the Eclipse, but when they were like, hey, can you come to my library and do a presentation? The answer was almost always no, right? Unless we were local to one of them. So we worked really closely with these two volunteer groups to get folks into those libraries. And it's just so nice because they have such a good searchable network online to find local folks to connect to. And I just wanted to share some of the, again, here's the whole orchestra. I think this one was from you, Andy, right? The orchestra with all of their Eclipse glasses on.
Yes, I led a performance of the planets where everybody got Eclipse glasses.
Yes, yes. Shamelessly stole that one from Andy. But I love this. We had one of the biggest events our library's ever seen. So in my language, we say Wawanin, thank you. And that's from the Menominee County Library. Lots more great things like that. We did do a big survey after the Eclipse just to see how folks liked it, right? There was a real possibility that folks were going to be like, oh my God, I don't ever want to do this again. This was so stressful. Some of you might have heard that CNN misspoke and told the entire American public that you can just go get limitless free glasses at your public library, which was not true. So we were really worried that this might be a negative experience for some libraries who had to field some of those questions, but we didn't see that at all. In our post-event evaluation, there was nothing negative. Folks were wanting to do it again. They were so excited to share their patrons' interactions. I think sometimes we get really excited as outreach professionals to preach to the choir because the choir is the folks who are already excited about what we're doing and they already know about it and you can have such deep conversations. But in the library world, there are folks who, you know, they had no idea what an eclipse was, what it meant. They didn't know we had an atmosphere, what an atmosphere meant, right? All of these folks were learning so much in such a short period of time that had it not been from the intervention of these libraries, they would have continued to not know some of this stuff that we think is pretty basic. So again, just lovely to see everything that came out of these libraries. A lot of them talked about building partnerships based on the Eclipse efforts that they were able to use further down the road. That's me and my family. I also got out of Dodge to go see the total. So we went to Idaho with my 10-inch Dobsonian. My kids are nerds. That's great. That is Brooks Mitchell's dog with his Eclipse glasses on. And then just throwing up, this is one of our libraries who was on the Path of Totality sent me this picture where they got sunspots and they were so excited to have gotten a picture of sunspots with their phone, right? Through their telescope with a filter on it. Like they said that people thought that was even more exciting than getting to see the full thing because they didn't know that you could see features of the sun. So again, just pointing out, this is just such a different audience than I think a lot of us are used to working with. And I don't want to say that in a way that makes it sound like the bar is lower because the bar isn't low. We should still all, do a good job, but we don't have to do something as amazing and spectacular as every program has the blow up planetarium and every program has a famous astronaut. Like libraries don't need that. They just need someone who's excited, who knows what's going on, and can help them be a little bit more prepared. Rick actually asked in the last session, what are you doing next? I think Andy's going to talk a little bit about, fingers crossed, our funding that might come in any day now. And I just wanted to point out these pictures on the right. One of the things we weren't able to do with the last Eclipse was go and do workshops with the state libraries because we didn't know who they were yet. So that's my big plan for the next 2 years is to visit every state of the union, Puerto Rico, all of the protectorates, and be able to provide the state library staff with the resources that they need to get the information to their individual constituent libraries. So I think that is, whirlwind, but I wanted to leave time to ask questions. That is all I have. So Andy, I'm going to stop screen sharing and hand it over to you. And I did want to say, because I feel like I'm just talking to Andy and Dennis, if anyone else wants to turn your video on, like that's totally fine with me.
All right, you're still sharing. So,
oh, I am? Well, I should probably stop doing that. Oh, there it is.
There we go. And before I start my slides, let me just mention that one of the things that you said quickly that I want to make sure everyone understands is that the Space Science Institute already had a program working with libraries when we started. Through this Eclipse project in 2017, they enlarged that project tremendously so that the number of libraries who are now signed up with them and with NASA to distribute space science information grew, pardon the expression, astronomically during 2017 and is continuing to grow. So that program continues now, and we're going to take, we hope, full advantage of all the hard work they did getting those libraries into a network to then now use the libraries to do Eclipse outreach in 2023 and 24. So this is an ongoing project. And I just want to commend you guys for keeping that up and having all those libraries now at our fingertips. And we hope to enlarge it. So let me share a few slides, and then we'll turn things over to Dennis, and we'll have some discussion as well. Let me start here, slideshow from the beginning. So this, as you hear, is about distributing not just glasses, but information through public libraries around the country. I've mentioned this before, but we are faced with an Eclipse outreach challenge that involves 500 million people in the next 2 years. So nothing we say is adequate to the challenge, I suspect. This is the typical astronomer when they begin to realize the challenges that we face. I've mentioned already that we think that public libraries can be part of a much larger effort, that they can simply be the outreach focus, but that many activities can happen. They can be advertised at the library. They can happen at or through the library. Just thinking of this as your community center is a good way to start organizing your community. As you heard, we were able to do well in 2017. I showed this earlier. Again, I want to mention that the librarians actually took a webinar with some of us that are on this panel, and that helped them, not necessarily that they could then do a workshop for their own clients, but they felt much more comfortable answering questions at the reference desk and so on. So training the librarians, quite separate from training the library patrons, was an important part of the project. And those librarians, I suspect, are now Eclipse leaders for their libraries and for eclipses to come. You heard this already from Anne, that there are something like 16,000 branch libraries, 9,000 administrative units, so many libraries have different branches. We were able to reach about 4,000 administrative units in 2017, and our hope is to double that in the next two eclipses. We hope to double the numbers in 2023 and 24, presuming that the funding that we hope will come through comes through. As I said, it really helped that the Space Science Institute, through their StarNet, already had good contacts in the world of libraries. The library world is not always an easy one to break into nationally. Easy to go to your local library and offer help, but the national connection was invaluable to us. So here are a few of the lessons that we learned from 2017. We did find that libraries turn out to be ideal for distributing glasses because people are used to getting things free at the library. So even though many people were selling glasses, the libraries, because of the nice funding we had, were able to give them away, and they were a trusted source of information in the community. And also, not only the glasses, but the information packets or the information sessions, libraries were a trusted place to do this. And the libraries covered, as you saw, the entire country. My map is not as fine as Anne's, but it's the same idea. You heard already that we did 35,000 public programs about the eclipse nationwide, and that's an astounding number. These were complemented by many other groups doing programs, but these were the ones that happened at the libraries. Even so, not everyone got glasses. Some people didn't know what to do despite all the training we did. And sorry, can't resist that one. And over 1 million last-minute requests from libraries for glasses could not be accommodated. So that was a really tough thing for us, that after the libraries gave away all their glasses, they wanted more, and there was no way instantly to satisfy that. So that again speaks to planning in advance. As I said, everyone is busy, so you got to start early. We started a year early, and it really wasn't enough. So we hope to start earlier this time. And I should mention, by the way, that part of the reason we started early, and another person involved with this I see on the call, is Doug Duncan, who's at the University of Colorado. And Doug was an important part of helping us to realize early on how much start we needed to do. So I wanted to give him credit for that. Another thing we know now much better than we did before is that libraries are poor. They're not a well-endowed institution where in most places they're often doing fundraisers and bake sales. So it's really important not to expect the library to pay for anything. You got to make sure that you fund the glasses and the information elsewhere. They might have the funds to run off copies. These days, I think most things will be electronically distributed, so printing will not be as big an issue. But just remember that your library is not like the well-endowed private universities. They really have a shoestring budget. That's why we were particularly grateful for funding from the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation, from Google, from the Research Corporation, and others who stepped up and helped us to get the glasses. And NASA itself gave out glasses, and at the end provided some of the extra glasses they had for the libraries, and we were really grateful for that. It was really good to give librarians as few choices as possible. Sometimes it can be overwhelming if you offer too many things for the librarians. We gave them only 2 choices in how many glasses they could order. In any package, they could get either 200 glasses or 1,000 glasses. Many of the libraries later were sorry that they'd only ordered 200, but it's important not to give them all the choices in the world, because then the administration of such a project becomes a nightmare. And if you're working with libraries, make sure that you have clear choices to offer them. We did put together this booklet that libraries could have in physical form. We gave them the masters. We gave them some copies with the glasses, and they were free to run off as many copies as they wanted to. And again, this time the booklet we're going to do is going to be electronically available, so much easier to distribute. Another lesson is that it was good to work directly with the 2 manufacturers, the main manufacturers of Eclipse Glasses. Again, Doug helped us to get in touch with these organizations, the American Paper Optics Company and Rainbow Symphony. This helped us to avoid the issues that arose later with improperly made foreign glasses. We were able to say that all the glasses at the libraries were made reliably to the standards that have been put forward and are available at the American Astronomical Society website. And Rick Feinberg is working to refine those standards, and you'll be hearing more about that in future workshops. But we were able to make sure that the glasses at libraries were reliable, and then the word got out to the media too, that at least those glasses could be trusted. But the more important reason to work with them was that they had the packaging and shipping facilities to handle thousands of orders, all to different addresses. We could not have imagined any of us, including the entire Space Science Institute staff, mailing out thousands and thousands of packages to different addresses and making sure that each order was counted properly. But the 2 companies had a whole setup for mailing out packages of glasses and information packets, and we paid them for that service, and we didn't regret it for a moment. We learned that few librarians had training in astronomy. That probably was no surprise to any of you. They worried about being able to answer public questions. So it was important to do workshops for librarians, including some at library meetings, to offer webinars the months before so that they were at least brought up to speed about some of the more basic questions. It was also to encourage others to work with their libraries, partners, and I talked about that on the main panel, including professional and amateur astronomers, science teachers from the local high school were really helpful for libraries. They're some of the most genial and good at getting information out people in the world. And then the NASA ambassador programs, et cetera, were also a big help. It's important that your instructions to beginners be clear. This cartoon, I think, was already shown yesterday, but it's very important that people know the difference between a solar eclipse and a lunar eclipse and that they follow safety instructions. We did our workshops and webinars not just for the librarians, but also for the expert group. So for example, with Dennis's help, we did workshops for the National Science Teaching Association. Claire was a big help with those so that the science teachers who went out also had up-to-date and clear information on how to do eclipse outreach. And so if you're interested in helping with training of these eclipse group, of these partner groups, or if you'd like to become involved with some of these partner groups, we'll talk about that in a second. Jeff Bennett has suggested that we get Congress to fund glasses for 2024. And given the situation at Congress, I wonder if that's a realistic view. I suspect not. I think that this is, as wonderful as that was as a thought, that's not going to happen. So it's going to be up to us to find ways to fund glasses and information for 2024. And we still think that libraries and the crowds they bring in may be our best bet, even in this crazy time in which we live. So there's my email. That's fraknoi@fhda.edu. Let me get rid of this. Fraknoi@fhda.edu. So if you want to be part of a partnership effort, you can send me your name, your institution if you have one, the city and state you're in, and what you can do. In particular, are you an individual interested in helping your library? Or do you want to connect us to some group of possible partners that you're part of? For example, if you're part of some group that will that we can talk in front of and say, how do you get all your members involved, whether it's a professional group of scientists or a group of educators or science centers. If you can get partners involved and you want to help with that effort, we'd love to hear from you. Or if you want to get involved with your personal library, let us know. There is a newsletter, Anne mentioned it in the panel, that she has for people in the library effort. But in particular, if you want to help with the partnership effort, that's what Dennis and I are in charge of doing, and we'd love to hear from you. All right, so with that, I'm going to stop sharing. Let's see. It says, Claire, I need some help. It suddenly says new share, but doesn't say stop sharing.
Underneath.
Okay,
yeah, we get it.
All right, great. So now I'm going to hand things over to Dennis Schatz from the Institute for Learning Innovation, who is another co-conspirator with us in this entire project.
Well, thank you, Andy. I first really do want to commend SSI and StarNet. When we, and it really was Doug Duncan, Annie Holland, Paula Dusenberry at that time, Andy and myself, conspiring and thinking about how do we get funding from the Moore Foundation as it ultimately turned out. And it was just logical to go through StarNet. They already had an elaborate relationship with libraries all over the country. And you've heard more than enough from Annie and Andy about how that worked and how we hope to go forward in the future with, again, more funding from more. The couple of things I want to add and just emphasize is, and I really said this a little bit in the previous session, and that we need to think beyond the path of totality and the path of angularity. We keep on talking about, oh, you really need to go to totality, you're going to miss out. And while I think that's true, when you get there, it's amazing. Most people can't do that. They're working, they can't leave their job. They may not have the funds to do it. It's a bit like telling them, just eat cake. While you can encourage that, we need to make sure that everybody around the country, around North America, is ready to view the eclipse and feel good about it. That they're not missing out. They're really seeing something great. So that's something that I think the libraries were really valuable for. And as Annie showed, the distribution wasn't just along the path of totality; it was all over the United States. I think the other two things that results in is we keep on, I remember last time and even this time, it's well, amateurs won't be available on the day of the eclipse. Well, that's absolutely true. But actually, we don't necessarily want them then. We need them a month ahead, 2 months ahead. It's getting people ready when they're at the library. So it's not just, oh, we'll go do one thing at the library and we're done. How can you get so you do multiple things at the library, because not everybody's going to come on a given day. So getting things done well before is important, and starting early. We've already heard that. And working here in the state of Washington, especially with the local libraries, if you think about this, the summer of 2023 is going to be the big time to get information out, because it'll be the summer of learning at libraries across the country. That's their big, used to be the summer of reading. Now it's the summer of learning. Well, that's a big time. Well, when do they start planning that? As soon as the summer of learning 2022 is over, that's 4 months away, they start planning the summer of learning 2023. So we really need it in the fall of this year is the time to really get the libraries to start talking about what's happening in the summer. And so I think how much can we make that be part of their summer of learning is really going to be critical. And then I think that just the last thing I want to add is think about this as a dual experience, a twofer. You get 2 eclipses for the price of one. A lot of people I've talked to, teachers are talking about, I'm going to do this work and you're ready for the 23 eclipse, and then I'm going to do something for the 24. Well, it all happens the same academic year. So for teachers, you really need to think about, I'm going to be doing something to get them ready for both. And I think that's also true for libraries. It's, certainly we'll be able to get back after the fall 23 eclipse and do things. But how do we make this something that's really a twofer, and you can make people think about both eclipses simultaneously? It's a bit like the warm-up band that's coming in before the main event. That's another way to look at it. And I think that'll be really important for us to do. And finally, just what we hope with the new funding from more is that we will have be able to identify some science teachers who will be resources for the community, and we'll be able to go out and work with libraries. So I think this idea of who can we partner with will really be a key part. It's not just, it's not just the libraries, it's how do we get the amateurs, professionals, science teachers involved. So I'm excited, and hopefully we'll have more to say about funding from the Moore Foundation in the near future.
Great. Thank you so much, Dennis. So now I'd like to open up the floor. I know there's already a nice discussion going on in the chat, but what I want to encourage you to do is to raise your hand, and then I can see you on my screen, and I'll start to recognize people in the order that I see you raising your hand. And I encourage you, even if you put something into the chat, if you want to contribute something to the discussion, we have almost 70 people here. So it's a good place to begin to add your thoughts. And I'm going to start with Michelle Nichols from the Adler Planetarium, please.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Just a really quick suggestion for those who maybe haven't started reaching out to their libraries yet. I started conversations last year with the 3 library distribution systems in Illinois. So that might be another source. There are libraries, or there are systems in states that get library books and other resources from one library to the next. If your library doesn't have a book, they'll get it from another library so you can check it out. So they are already used to getting gobs of stuff out to libraries. So, and the ones in Illinois have already have ready-made online professional development programs already through Zoom and YouTube. So we don't have to start from scratch with these systems. So start your conversations now because they're already making plans for later. So just wanted to give out that suggestion.
And is that the same as the state library systems that you were talking about?
Oh, good. I was about to type something, but yes, so those groups are actually different, right? So like in Colorado, there's Marmot and a bunch of other ones. So they're the ones who put the books on the trucks and share between the libraries. So I can get people contacts for some states, but Andy, to your point, yes, the state library definitely knows who those people are in the contacts. So if it's harder to reach out, because sometimes those are like even for-profit entities, but the state librarian, they will definitely help.
Yep. In Illinois, it's the Heartland system. In the southern part of the state, the rails system, I think in the northern part of the state, I may have just switched those. Anyway, and then Chicago has its own system since there are 80 library branches in Chicago. So,
Wow.
so yeah, they're already on board with us. So getting excited.
All right, next is the man with the magnificent beard, Wayne Wooten.
Hey, Andy. I just, before the session started, was out imaging filaments and prominences on the sun. And at Pensacola Beach, we got a beautiful video last evening of the sun setting behind the bathhouse. And we had 3 big prominences right on the eastern limb. And so in the video for the last minute there, you see a prominence go, and then a prominence go, and then a prominence go. So the cost of hydrogen alpha telescopes has come down a great deal. Some really nice ones can be had for around like $500. And I would like to stress that we already have in our local club 5 different loaner telescopes, typically the 4-inch Newtonians, in the local libraries. But if you can get a grant or get the funds from private donations to actually put a hydrogen alpha telescope on a loan basis in a library, particular in time for the 2023 annular eclipse and the 2024 eclipse. But hydrogen alpha telescopes, of course, give you so much more detail on all that's happening accompanying the sunspots, with the prominences hanging out over the limb, and there's 4 big filaments snaking across the sun's face at this moment, each of them over 100,000 miles long, you know, like great earthworms on the sun. So the hydrogen alpha sun is something that's very dramatic, and this is something that will keep them aware of solar activity long after the 2024 solar eclipse, because of course the greatest activity is probably going to be a year in the future, in 2025 now. So if you can get your astronomy club to raise funds, or donors who are upgrading from a PST to a Coronata 60, for instance, donate the PST to the library. This is something that we can make a real resource for the libraries and, of course, schools.
And I'm going to ask you to say what you put in the chat, because great minds think alike. And
oh,
okay.
Yeah. So yeah, Wayne, you're 100% on with the H alpha telescopes, and why we like them so much is they don't require the eclipse. So we're actually, again, fingers crossed, if we're funded, we'll be sending 4 H alpha telescopes to each of the state library agencies that they can circulate before and after the eclipse. We're actually going to ask them to pull them from circulation the week of the 2 eclipses, so that people aren't fighting over a time that it doesn't matter to have them. But so that is our hope. And that way, again, it doesn't matter. every library will eventually get to use them if they're circulating. And then, yes, hopefully they'll be able to convince their friends of the library to buy them one of their own.
I
This
also
part
want to
hasn't been
remind people.
funded. So, but just hold on one second.
Yeah.
This part hasn't been funded. So, and we're keeping out, we think that the other part, the glasses and the information, is pretty likely to be funded,
Mhm.
but this additional part may not be. So please don't go around saying that we have the funding for this, but we'll let everybody know once we know about the funding situation. All right,
Yeah,
I'm gonna let other people talk. So Dan, go ahead. Dan Schneiderman from the Rochester Museum.
Yeah, so we've already started working with our libraries here in Rochester, New York. One of the resources that we kind of we use them as a regular library, and they did some research for us on the last time we had an eclipse, and have been able to pull newspaper articles, have been able to pull photos from the last time we had the total solar eclipse in the region from 1925. So we've been integrating the history point, which has been excellent. But one of the things I want to bring up for people is, when you work with the libraries, remember to separate out some of your age groups. The materials you provide for a youth librarian compared to a teen librarian, compared to an overall librarian, like libraries do have the different departments. The same way that you think about the different book sections. One thing I personally would love to see out of AAS, and I would love to contribute, is a list of books broken down by age group, everything from ABCs of space, which works great at that toddler level where, you know, E is for eclipse, and I want to say P is for penumbrum, which is fantastic. But remember, you do have those different age groups. We've also worked with our libraries about helping out with solar hands-on space activities for their maker spaces, as a lot of libraries now have maker spaces. There's a lot of art activities, and kind of outside the main libraries, I just want to bring up, has anyone ended up doing solar eclipse classes in little free libraries? There's a ton of little free libraries out there, and just to even drop some books, like I'm personally looking at buying a few books that I can just drop all across the region, and hopefully get someone to donate some glasses for this cause as well. They're really great for being like hyper local, and we can't forget to go down to that level.
Yeah, it's really important to make sure that kids' books are included. Dennis, do you want to say a word about the two NSTA books and what's going to happen in the coming years?
Sure. I mean, we're still in the process of trying to figure that out, because for many people, they still think it's a little bit early. And when you start to think about it, it isn't. But there's 3 NSTA journals, K-12 journals, Science and Children, Science Scope, and Science Teacher. People are probably aware. They will have eclipses across America will be the theme in either the summer or fall of 2023. And we hope they had an insert last time. We hope that insert will be available again, much like the insert for libraries, but it'll be more focused for the classroom, and it'll be an electronic version. So that's on the boards. I think I mentioned yesterday, there's already a webinar plan for fall of this year, October 20th. And certainly a key part of that, and it will be the solar science book, which is a curriculum materials for teachers, but also has materials that will be useful for after school programs, libraries, and so on. Actually, some of the materials that we made available to libraries was an adaptation of some of that material. And then, of course, there's When the Sun Goes Dark, a children's book about what causes eclipses. It's grandparents who are eclipse chasers come home to their granddaughter's birthday, and the grandchildren want to understand why they would fly 10,000 miles and spend $10,000 to go see an eclipse. And the grandparents actually explain what happens and why they go 10,000 miles to see it. So we expect those to be popular. They were featured at the NSTA conference in Houston last week, and they will be featured again at every conference and these webinars going forward. I won't say more than that. Certainly there will be more information coming out through the task force to everybody that's involved and beyond that. You're muted, Andy.
Sorry, I'm muted myself. So I'm going to move on to Rick. And if you'll unmute yourself and do better than I did, then go ahead.
The three most common words in the last 2 years are "you are muted." That's what I've heard. It makes sense. So Anne, and actually Anne already responded to part of it. I just want to mention we've approached libraries here in New Hampshire about a summer 2023 reading list, sort of about solar eclipses, because that'll be right before the two come, obviously. So that's a great time to promote that. And I just want to ask that we don't have just science. I know some of the fiction takes a little literary license, but I think if we put a disclaimer in there, I'm trying to reach Stephen King in Maine because he lives in Bangor, just south of Totality. And he has 2 books, Gerald's Game and Dolores Claiborne, that feature a total solar eclipse. I know it doesn't help the science, but we want to try to reach everybody. And if there's a Stephen King book on the list, that might get people that might not normally read about eclipses. And once they read that again or read it, then they might go back and get a more science book, and obviously get some for kids, Native Americans, marginalized populations. But I just would love to get a full national list that we can share with everybody.
And I think that's something that the task force can work on, to have an interdisciplinary list. I made a list of eclipse-related music last time because that's my hobby, is astronomy and music, and we'll certainly circulate that list again. And if you have suggestions, by the way, of any eclipse-related material, let me know. Eclipse music. I know there are eclipse mysteries out there. There's some eclipse science fiction. And we'll make sure we'll get a list together.
I'm just going to ask one more question because I don't remember who told me it, but someone told me yesterday, I think it's a short story. I don't know if it's by Bradbury or one of the science fiction writers, but really intrigued me. And it was a story about a boy who was put in a closet, not allowed outside, but it wasn't for an eclipse. In this world, it was always eclipsed, and there was only a couple minutes of sunlight every few years or every few decades. And so it sort of took the reverse of what we have. We have sunlight half the time and then sometimes eclipsed. And this book flipped it, saying, well, you have night all the time and only a couple minutes of sunlight. And I thought that was really interesting. I didn't know if anyone
that's an Isaac Asimov story. And right now I'm having a senior moment and can't remember the name, but yes, Nightfall. Michelle's already with it. It's called Nightfall. It's one of the most famous stories that Isaac Asimov wrote, and you can find it in many collections of science fiction.
So even though it doesn't talk about an eclipse, I think that would be a cool thing to have in there. And again, we would reach more people.
Great idea. David Barron, you're up next. Please unmute yourself.
Oh yeah, there we go. Well, Rick stole my thunder a little bit because I was just going to put in a plug for seeing the eclipses as teachable moments, not just for science, but for the liberal arts. Back in 2017, I gave lots of lectures at libraries about my book on the eclipse of 2017, which is really more about history than science. And there was great interest in how people experienced eclipses in the past. One of my favorite essays was written by James Fenimore Cooper, who wrote Last of the Mohicans. And in 1806, he witnessed a total eclipse in upstate New York. And what he describes is exactly the same human reaction that we have today to total eclipses. And I would love to contribute to any kind of reading list of materials that goes beyond the science that might get distributed to libraries and to help with any kind of outreach. Dan also mentioned about history. Again, I mean, my book on the eclipse of 1878, I just found there's so much you can learn about past eclipses that local libraries can find about total eclipses that may have occurred in their own states or their own cities in decades past to help bring history alive around the eclipse. So I'm happy to help with those efforts.
Great. And thank you for that book. That was a fascinating book.
Oh, thanks.
All right. S. Ferguson, you are next.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. Lots of great information. I attended a program at my local library in the DC area, learned a lot, and decided I better get to the Path of Totality. And I ended up there in North Georgia. A couple of questions. So for, of course, friends that I'm wanting to convince to be in the Path, getting those glasses, I know that leveraging, quantity orders is important for like schools and libraries. But if you're just a community or organizing a neighborhood, event in your community, where's the best place to do that? Is that from the libraries?
Who wants to end? I mean, let me start the answer and then we'll ask other people to chime in. But oftentimes your local science museum is an excellent place to get reliable glasses. So if you have a nature center or science museum, they'll surely have a bulk order and be selling them individually. If you go to the library and look at Sky and Telescope or astronomy magazines, there will be people offering glasses for sale. What are some other thoughts that people have about where you can get glasses?
Dude, gas stations are already selling them, right? Mm-hmm. Like the big like Buc-ee's and things like that. Like they saw what they missed last time.
Okay,
so we'll put some things in the chat for you.
Yeah, the Astronomical League was going to have glasses, and contact your local astronomy club. I imagine our own club is going to have individualized glasses set up just for the Pensacola events of 2023 and 2024. So contact your local astronomy club.
This is a little small area in Arkansas where I have, trying to engage them and getting excited about the eclipse, but I'll have them to look around and thanks so much for the tips.
The two umbrella groups of amateur clubs, the Night Sky Network and the Astronomical League, if you Google them and find their websites, both their websites have a club finder where you can put in your state or your zip code, and it will show you the closest amateur astronomy club to you. So take advantage of that. One is called the Night Sky Network, and the other one is called the Astronomical League.
Thank you so much.
The next question comes from the godfather of eclipse viewing and eclipse information, Jay Pasikoff. Welcome, Jay.
Hi, Andy. Glad to hear you and a lot of good suggestions. And I sure hope you get the big grant that will allow a lot of telescopes. But for the general viewer and for the people lined up on a daily basis, including the eclipse and all the other days, I think people like to see sunspots. I think we'd just like a white light viewer. There is this little sunspotter for a few $100s, much cheaper than the H alpha telescopes, and really any telescope could just project on a screen, on a piece of paper you hold, the sunspots. So I'm in favor of most of the viewing being in white light with the sunspots showing, and in 2024 we'll be very close to sunspot maximum, and so there should be several sunspot groups on the sun at all times for the people to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think it's really important that we help the librarians not just cover the sun during that one day event, but to do more about the sun in general. And the grant that Anne put together definitely has that there will be solar astronomy education as well as eclipse education. And I think all of us could do more in that direction, that the sun is exciting, not just on the day of the eclipse, but it's our, our source of heat and light and life itself for all the days and all the times of our existence. So it's important that we allow people to think about the sun on other days as well.
Yeah, and I want to, if it's okay, interject real quick. Sun spotters are just amazing tools for libraries because they incorporate the art component that's so important. Like if you guys were to ask me right now, Annie, I have one day to go to a library. Should I bring my regular telescope, my solar telescope, my H alpha, or the sun spotter? The answer is always going to be the sun spotter. The kids actually getting to draw the shape of the sun and the sunspot on there and getting to take it home. It takes a little longer to get everybody through it, but it is 100%, I think, the most impactful for places like libraries where the kids have never had the opportunity to do anything like that. And it's cheaper.
Okay, so Anne, I would be glad to see the grant. If you send me a copy of the grant, or Andy could send it, eclipse@williams.edu would work to get me a copy.
Okay.
Thank you. Good work. Bye.
Thank you, Jay. Before I recognize the next Jay, I just want to encourage Doug. Do you want to say something about your hardware store story? You told that yesterday, but not everybody who's here today was here yesterday. So if you want to tell us a little bit, get in line and tell us about the hardware store in Colorado and how you got distribution of glasses through them. I think that would be a good story for people to hear. Jay Miller, you're next. Please go ahead.
Yeah, another Jay. I live in what we call the DMV, that's District, Maryland, Virginia. I live right across the street from a middle school, and we're talking about public libraries, but I was just thinking about the library of the middle school across the street and maybe contacting them, and also I've worked with one of the high schools in the area because my wife used to work there at one of the high schools. And this I think is another source, another place to go. I think I'll talk to them and maybe set up some kind of program with them.
Yeah, we deliberated about the whole idea of school libraries. That's a whole different universe, much more complex, many more rules. And we selected the public libraries as the ones that were much more accessible to the entire community. But that doesn't prevent you from working with your local school library. Just going on school grounds often requires various checks and fingerprinting and so on, because schools are being very careful about who they allow on campus. But it's especially good if you find the local science supervisor or science teacher for that school, and then you can work through them. But certainly you're right. Working with the schools is another wonderful way that you can contribute to Eclipse outreach.
Yeah, I've done several times to schools and set up those.
Thank you, Jay. All right, Don Lubovich, you are next. Please unmute.
Thank you. Again, I mentioned this yesterday with a lot of different people today. As part of my astronomy festival on the National Mall, I worked with the Smithsonian Museums, and they created a Solstice Saturday event. They had programs, events, all were free, and only 2 science museums, Air and Space and Natural History. The other 18 museums were non-science. They had art, museum, costume. The Cooper Hewitt Museum in New York City was designed. They had clocks with the sun motif, astronomy wallpapers, and they were very happy to do things about the solstice and the sun. And I'm going to try to convince them to leave some of their museums, and some of the museums are in the Path of Totality, to do solar and sun and or eclipse related events or activities or programs throughout the during the eclipse. They have about 250 affiliate museums throughout the country. It's only a small fraction, of course, of all the museums in the country. And maybe we should contact whatever the American Museum Association or Society is, to see if we can coordinate with them to try to get museums, non-science museums, to do programming.
Dennis, do you want to respond to that about science museums and AZTEC?
I mean, sure. I think, Don, as he points out, there's a wealth of opportunities, and certainly I think, Dan might be able to speak to this even more from from a museum perspective, but AZTEC, I think every science center and science-based museum, so that includes actually a lot of children's museums, natural history museums, will be, this will be high on their list in terms of being resources to the community, having programs. I think they see themselves, we certainly did, we were in the path or near the path for the 1979 Eclipse in the Pacific Science Center. We were the epicenter, as that was brought up yesterday, that term. And certainly we were in 2017. So I think that we will find that the goal of many institutions will be, how do we become the place that people want to come to learn about the eclipse? I mean, what we want are the museums doing that. We want the libraries doing that. We want schools doing that, because you need all of that in order to convince or not convince to reach the, what was the number, 500 million, whatever the number is that you had, Andy. So I think that will be really important.
Great. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Don. Wayne, you're up next.
I have worked with Earth Day since it got started in 1970, and I would think Earth Day 2023 would be an excellent time to stress solar observing, sunspot observing, distribute solar glasses, obviously talk about solar power in terms of a green economy for the future. So I think we can get a lot of the ecologists turned on to observing our home star and so forth. And following up on Jay's stress of the sunspots. Remember the lottery we ran in 2017, where there was a big sunspot about the center of the sun, and we had the students and public submit guesses as to what instant that sunspot would go behind the advancing limb of the moon, and awarded the winner a lemon meringue pie. So this is a great way of keeping interest in observing the partial phases, because it can be a little bit boring. But not only hydrogen alpha telescopes, but even, as Jay points out, visible light telescopes. If you're watching the progress of the eclipse, as one sunspot after another is cut off by the advancing limb, it gives you some feeling of the celestial mechanics in action.
Boy, this is off-track betting of a whole different kind. We don't want the AAS to lose its nonprofit status, but what a nice idea. Thank you. All right, Doug Duncan, you're up.
Okay, thanks, Andy. So my experience actually is documented in an article for Mercury, the publication of the ASP in summer 2015. It was called Run an Eclipse Event for Fun, Education, and Profit. And I would invite everybody listening to just take a step and pause and actually ask yourself which things you want to do for free and which things you don't want to do for free, okay? And my relatively small planetarium is an example of that. We ordered 8,000 or 10,000 eclipse glasses, and I think we paid, 45 cents each or something, and we sold them for $2. Tons of people thanked us. Hundreds and hundreds of people thanked us for having this for sale for $2. Not a single person ever said, oh, I have to pay $2. And our planetarium made about $15,000, which we could then use for other educational programs. I convinced one famous hardware store in Boulder, Colorado, to also stock about 8,000 eclipse glasses, and they just could not get over what happened. There were lines stretching through all 8 cash registers at the hardware store. They were out onto the sidewalk. The people were saying, in 75 years, we've never had anything sell as much as eclipse glasses. Now, they kept their $15,000 and didn't donate it to any educational program. I have a very impressive video, if anybody wants to just email me, of interviews with the people at the hardware store about the community flocking to the place where they could get the glasses. So it's certainly great to give things away for free, and I think there are places for that. But no matter how much we get in the way of grants, there are so many Americans We can't give them all for free unless Congress does something. So I never had anybody complain that we were there with Eclipse glasses and they had to pay $2.
Really good point. And that's another partnership with a store or some kind of organization that wants to do this.
Quick, Andy and everybody before I go. Some will remember that for the 2017 Eclipse, I was able to arrange with the factories for an educator discount, if you ordered like 500 or something. And I am working on that right now. And I can't announce it yet because it isn't finalized, but certainly everything will be finalized with a nice surprise by October, this meeting. So we'll be ready by then.
And you'll let the task force know so we can let people on our mailing list know.
Yes.
Great. No, absolutely. One of the other organizations that we're thinking about that you might want to think about is service clubs. So every community has clubs like the Rotary Club and Sons in Retirement and other clubs like that. And they often are also a place where they might distribute glasses, where they might have the funds to buy glasses in bulk and then either make them available for free or sell them as a fundraiser for them as well. So scout groups are another place that you can consider as partners. So these are all good things to think about. All right, Terry Richardson, you're up next.
Yes, one thing we did in Charleston at the College of Charleston was run workshops at libraries. And in those workshops, we made solar viewers that projected a 3 or 4 inch image of the sun. And we had an American Astronomical Society grant to do this. And we got several hundred of them out there. The optics came from Surplus Shed and it cost $5. So it was something we could afford to do, whereas we couldn't buy a couple of the sunspotters, which are sharper devices. They're really much better if you can afford them. But we had groups of minority folks sign up for these workshops, and they would leave the workshop with a projector that they could take back to their communities and show the sun during the eclipse, the partial phases. Also, the larger sunspots would show with this device. And I did a poster paper on our device that's for this meeting that's in the gather section. And that poster also has a URL where it details more about what we did with the device and how we accomplished what we did. But that's one option. $5 for the optics, and we used cardboard or wood or scrap foam board to make the rest of the viewer. So it was a cheap project and involved the kids and got them interested in learning about the eclipse as well as making something useful they could teach in their communities. We also, those who completed the workshop, got a little badge called Eclipse Science Ambassador badge they could pin on after they had lessons on safe viewing of the eclipse and why the eclipse happened.
Great, thank you.
Terry, I wanted to salute you because it's also an excellent introduction to optics and focal lengths. Yes, that is a really great project to help them learn about convex, concave lenses. It's a great introduction to optics for STEM.
Great. Thank you, Terry. All right, Dan Schneiderman, you're up next.
Yeah, to kind of circle back to the museums, I recommend not only looking at the nationwide level, but if you look at the statewide level, for example, in New York, we have Manny Museums of New York, where, we meet yearly. There's even quarterly workshops. We've already started chatting with a number of museums. And museums and libraries work heavily together, and we're all kind of bracing for impact, especially as it will probably be break week leading into the eclipse. And where do families go during break week? Heavily to libraries and museums. We are looking at getting slammed. And there's even opportunities for partnerships where, we could do a pass. You can actually get passes at at a lot of libraries to go to museums. So I know we do that with our local one. And One of the great things is that, we're looking at doing a pass between all of the museums. You just pay one price and there you are for the week leading into the eclipse, because we're all doing eclipse materials. But that's to talk more about later. But really, I just wanted to reiterate that whole school break suggestion of libraries do a lot of programming around school breaks. It's going to get busy. I know we've partnered with our libraries year round already, just talking about, either during breaks or during summer. And a lot of libraries, I think, have already started tapping into other aspects of space. I know we did a lot for the 50th anniversary of landing on the moon. I'm sure there's going to be a lot being done for the Artemis missions. A lot going on there. And then one thing to kind of tie back to the overall message, one of the things I found most useful is finding the most relatable hooks. So thinking not only books, but thinking pop culture overall. I don't know how many times The Simpsons have included total solar eclipses, but I'm pretty sure it's over 5, possibly over 10 different episodes. The amount of people who know that, or if you're looking at millennial age groups, you can have Avatar: The Last Airbender. If you're looking older, you can do everything from Little Shop of Horrors. There's a lot of different hooks to tie into getting audiences activated. And once you get that initial activation, then you can start diving into some of the science. At least that's what I have personally found as super useful.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I wanted to just mention that the other thing that families do during breaks is go to national and state parks, which is the other breakout session. But that's another place where we're working hard to get information. The park rangers will be trained and will be part of this as well. Dennis, please go ahead.
Well, I want to follow up on Dan's comment in that there are a number of statewide associations, and I know Association of Science Technology Centers is a national group, but Texas has a very strong informal science education association. The grassroots group in North Carolina, I think they've renamed themselves now, is really strong. So it may well be that there's a group locally to work with and through, and at least as far as I know, and again, Dan said, most science centers I know of connect to their libraries. We offer some of our outreach programs. This is at Pacific Science Center. I say we, I'm not there anymore, but Pacific Science Center offers summer programs at the libraries, working with the libraries. And I know a lot of other, COSI and Columbus and other places that do that. So that's another way to think about making those connections.
Great, thank you. Andy Roberts, you're up next.
Yeah, I just had a quick thought of what about like Omni theaters or science centers that have IMAX theaters? Anything like that for people that aren't in the totality region, that or have inclement weather, that could use something like that and have like some of the NASA and YouTube and things like that broadcast on it? Has anyone ever engaged any of those organizations?
Dennis?
Yeah, I guess so. This, I mean, the things you bring up, I think it's a great idea, Andy. And it, again, I think many institutions have done that. Many science centers have an IMAX or have an IMAX theater. And I know for the last Eclipse in 2017, of course, a lot of our staff wanted to go down to Oregon and so on to see it. We still at Pacific Science Center, knowing that there'll be a lot of people there to see the partial eclipse projected into our, I think we used actually the Exploratorium, who has always been good at live streaming. So thanks to Rob Semper. I don't know if he's on the if part of this group or not, but Rob Semper in the Exploratorium. So we live streamed into our IMAX, a very large image of the eclipse and had eclipse activities going on site. But we did use the IMAX theater that way. And I actually don't know how many other people did that, but it certainly is something that would be very easy to do. So good idea, Andy.
And someone put in into the chat that we will have a separate breakout on what science centers and museums are doing this afternoon. That's part of the program for this workshop.
Okay, thank you.
Great. All right. Well, I see no further raised hands. Let me ask the panelists, any sort of last thoughts before we conclude?
My two big things are, I've been throwing a lot of stuff in the chat, but if anyone just wants to chat with me or some of the SSI staff, just about general library things, doesn't have to be Eclipse related, like how do I get involved in presenting at my local library conference, or who do I reach out to, please just go ahead and email me or Jessica Santiscoy, whose email I've also put in the chat, and we'd love to get that scheduled. Number two, perhaps is more of a question for the AAS organizers, is there are so many people I heard making lists and having plans to have how are we making sure that we are benefiting from each other's information and not duplicating? And I missed the whole conversation yesterday, so hopefully it already got dealt with, but I fear multiple lists.
Well, there's no question there'll be multiple lists. This is the United States. So, but I think one of the things the task force is charged with is to coordinate efforts. So we encourage people to let us know if you're doing something. The task force will have the mailing list of everyone on this workshop and the other workshops that we're doing. So we will make sure we circulate and try to coordinate all such efforts. I heard the suggestion that we should have one complete list of all the interdisciplinary resources about eclipses. So music, fiction, mystery, science fiction, etc. And if I'm happy to, because I'm a list maker from way back, I'm happy to help with coordinating those efforts. If people want to let me know, and I put my email in the chat, let me know if you're producing such a list, and we'll try to have a coordinated list of all of those. But it's the job of the task force to do this. The AAS website will try to have a resource page. It already has a resource page, which will list the national resources that are available. But there's no question that there'll be duplication, and perhaps that's healthy. And you've put into the chat also much more information about the general library contact program that you have separate from this Eclipse program. There are many other NASA at your library programs. And NASA is kind of regrouping. Alex Young, who was kind of the leader of the NASA Education Outreach Program, now has been, he's moved on to other things. And so there are 3 new people who are working at NASA. And we will hear a little bit of a report on what they're planning to do this afternoon, but then we look forward to what they come up with and what projects they're going to have as they regroup. So I think that will be something that we'll hear more about in the future. And again, the task force will be circulating that information. Dennis, any last thoughts from you?
You know, I actually think we covered everything, and I'd like to repeat the things about starting early. Thinking about people off the eclipse, total eclipse and annular eclipse is probably the other thing that really I keep on talking about, because as much as we start talking about the eclipse, it's real easy to just go back to totality and annularity. But I think it is to think, you know, it's great we've been talking about libraries, but how do we make this let's say a learning ecosystem? How do we connect to, whether it's schools, after school, to libraries? How do we think about bringing those people together so that they can plan together? So I think that'll be important too.
Great.
Dennis, on that subject, sorry if I jumped in. A lot of regions have regional STEM hubs, which is where a lot of those groups actually come together and meet and discuss how they can help each other out in the community. I know that there's groups all across New York State, and I believe that there's a larger national Eclipse, not Eclipse, STEM hubs, STEM hub network all across the US.
You're right. The STEM learning ecosystems funded by a number.
There's those, and then there's a number of like smaller ones out there.
Right. Well, and they have that. They connect to a lot of those, and so there's one in Maryland. There's one in Oregon. I mean, there's a number around the country, and I think they're an umbrella. But going to those individual ones, I think you're right, Dan, especially in your own local area, are perfect.
Great. Well, we hope that this has been a useful session for people. We want to encourage you to get involved with your library. Let us know if you want to be among the partners, and we'll be reporting back to the task force and through the task force about this libraries project and how it's going. But thank you all for participating, and we'll give you 3 extra minutes for your break here, and we'll see you then at the sessions that follow. Thanks, everyone. And let's record the chat. Whoever is doing the recording, if we could also record the chat, that would be great.
I'm on it.
Good, thank you so much. All right, good session, everyone. Thank you for all your help.
I'll be in touch, Ann.
Okay, great.
And Andy. See ya.
All right, take care, everyone.